My guest today is Rodney Wilds. Welcome, Rodney.
How you doing?
Why don't you tell me a little bit about your film? I know the film is We Are Because We Were.
This is a documentary set in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. The gist of it is we are sort of taking a sort of mini trip through the vast swath information that has to do with the African American history of Winston-Salem. And we're starting sort of circa 1900, and we're working our way to the present. And this story is in large part, thanks to the Winston-Salem African American Archive, located in downtown Winston-Salem. And so we're using their primary source material. We're using their pictures, their audio files, their contacts, to tell the story in pieces. And obviously, the challenge for me as a director was to figure out, we have 100+ years of history. How am I going to tell a concise story about all these different things and all these different aspects of the history, the healthcare aspects, the educational aspects, the political aspects. There's a lot. There's a lot there, and the archive itself is just massive, and there's so much there that we had to sort of parse through and figure out. Okay, these are things that we want to tell, and these are stories we want to tell, but we want to tell them without sort of making it seem like, all right, these are important, and this other stuff that we're not going to talk about isn't as important. So the goal was to sort of give people a starting place to sort of, learn about the history firsthand, and then sort of come back to the archive if they wish to know more and sort of get involved that way. So the film sort of goes through those main points. And like I said, we're talking about transportation, we're talking about education, healthcare, we're talking about neighborhoods in Winston. We're talking about just how the city has grown and changed over the years. And all of this again is in an effort to fundraise for the archive itself. It's run by Mr. Lester Davis and Billy Rich. Those two reached out and wanted to do a film to just sort of raise awareness, raise money, try and get more people to be involved in the history. And so they actually reached out to the University of North Carolina School of the Arts about doing the film. And then the School of the Arts then reached out to me. So it was kind of that sort of train of thought. And, we met with Billy and Lester, and we just talked for a month about what we were going to do and how we wanted to do it. No cameras, no nothing, just sort of talking to them about what are the stories that you think are important, because obviously they've been in the archive for years and they just have so much knowledge and wealth of information. So going to them was a great help. And yeah, we went from there. We worked with some, well, they're former students now. They actually just graduated in the spring, but worked with some School of the Arts students who are incredibly gifted and talented. I also worked with Miss Hilda Willis, who was our curator on the project. Who just, again, she is just amazing. I can't say enough about how much she's helped this project. And yeah, so we made the film. And we also paired it up with a sort of an exhibit at the School of the Arts. And so we showed the film, and then we also had sort of a museum exhibit. Again, speaking about the aspects of the film, just in a more detailed way. We had artifacts from some of the stories. Like, for instance, we discuss a black bus transportation company in Winston called Safe Bus Company. And so at the museum installation, we had like the hats that the bus drivers used to wear. We actually got to go on to one of the old like 60s buses and film in there, which was crazy because it's this giant orange and white bus, which nowadays you don't really see that too often. You don't
No.
see, usually buses are pretty boring now, but we got to do that. And they had a old change collector from like the 60s. And so that was really, really cool. And people were able to see the film and then actually go and sort of interact with things within the film. So yeah, that's kind of the film in a nutshell, and we can go into more detail about, just different aspects of it. But really just wanting to be true to the history of the city, and just sort of show people that you can get involved in this history. You can be a part of it. And a lot of people that have seen it, especially those folks that are a little bit older, they recognize people in the film. They recognize these institutions, these schools that we're talking about, and they're like, hey, I remember that. I remember, so and so. And so it's really cool to have that community moment as well, and have those people talk about it as well. So, yeah.
Nice. If we could back up a moment for those who might be listening from other states or even other countries, uh, what could you say about like the history of Winston-Salem itself? You tell us a little bit about the place, and there's a deep history of civil rights there, and
Yeah, yeah. So, Winston is the history of the African American history of Winston, and just the history overall. It's very similar to a lot of cities in the South, especially if we're talking about civil rights, if we're talking about urban development and how that sort of changed neighborhoods and cities within the South. It's complex. I will say that it is very complex. There's a lot of nuance. There are things about Winston's history that I myself didn't know. And just so people know, I'm originally from Greensboro, North Carolina. So 20-25 minutes
next
from
city over,
Winston.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. Literally next city over. And there were things that I'd never heard of. And that's a city that's 20 minutes from me. So that was a big eye opener for me. And it's the history that I think, people just don't sort of talk about, because I think it's more about you have an opinion of how things are, and then a city like Winston comes along and you're like, wait a second, I thought so. For instance, speaking of civil rights, and obviously everybody's hopefully familiar with the Montgomery bus boycott and those protests to get for getting people to sit where they wanted, and Rosa Parks, and all that is very well documented. Well, in Winston Salem, surprisingly, they had their own African Americans had their own bus company, so they didn't have to sit in the back of a bus, and that blew my mind. I had no idea
Yeah.
that was a thing. I had no idea that it became, like, I think it was the second largest transportation company in the world at one point, and that was a history that even I didn't know myself, having been in this area, having studied history myself. And so it's things like that where I'm just like, wow, like these are things that again kind of go against the grain of the popular history that's told. And it's things that you don't really think about. Another instance is the Katie Bidding Reynolds Hospital. Obviously back during segregation, in terms of healthcare, obviously segregation played a role in that, and not having access to healthcare was a big problem. And so you see these African American hospitals that pop up because they're the only places where African Americans could go at the time. And so the KDB, as it's referred to, was one of those hospitals, but it wasn't just about providing healthcare. It was about teaching. It was about educating the future healthcare workers, educating nurses, doctors, and then sort of being that beacon within the community. And so it's something that you think about. Obviously, you think about the fact that if there is that segregation and there are white hospitals that aren't going to take black patients, you understand that that's obviously going to lead to those hospitals forming, but you sort of don't understand the community impact. And so that's kind of what this film does. And we're talking about we're talking about the history in a way that is not so much. We do highlight the adversity faced by African Americans in the community, but that's not the main purpose. The main purpose is to show that despite that adversity, despite the sort of overarching narrative of segregation, there are these things and these businesses and these institutions that have popped up, and they were thriving, and they were again, they sort of not necessarily, they don't necessarily, sort of break the illusion of the popular history, but it does sort of give you room to think like, well, if this sort of history is there and it's just hidden because people aren't really talking about it, where else, are we missing parts of this history? Where are these other businesses and institutions that we need to sort of look at and research? Because those have had an impact, and that impact is still felt today. So that was probably the biggest thing for me. Learning that history, speaking with people that were around at the time, and hearing their account of how it was, and how society has changed, was just, it was a big eye opener for me. And again, being someone who's literally right down the road, having no sort of knowledge that these things existed, was crazy for me. So yeah, it was just a really big learning opportunity for myself, and I think anybody that watches it.
Nice. You have a history background. So you have a bachelor's in history, and then you went to study film.
It's funny because I always tell the story that and I think it's similar to a lot of people because everybody lived it in 2020, sitting at home. So COVID hit. I was a junior at NC State. Go Pack! I'm just gonna, little plug there. And I was sitting at home, and I was like, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do post graduation. I think at the time, it's like, what are any of us going to do, because we're at home and we don't know when this is going to end. And so I actually had somebody that reached out to me and was like, hey, because they knew I had taken some film classes at State, and at that time I hadn't even started my film studies minor. I take like introduction to film, and I took another African American film class, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it. And they reached out and they were like, "Did you know Wake Forest has a documentary film program?" I was like, "No, I had no idea that was that was the case." And so I applied around like the start of 2021, and didn't think I was going to get in because they were asking about portfolios and all these different things, and I was like, I've never filmed, I've never edited, none of that. And I got in, and I met incredible people there, and I'm still in contact with those people today. Hasn't been, I graduated in 2023, so it's not been that long since I was there, but that was just a great opportunity to learn a little bit about the film industry, learn the craft itself, about cinematography, editing, lighting, sound, all these different things. And that has kind of been my story over the last several years, is just jumping into things that I am, again, not an expert in, but I feel that there's a passion there, there's a want to learn these things, to do these things. And it's been exciting at times. Sometimes it's been scary because I've just been like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I feel like I feel like everybody has that sort of imposter syndrome a little bit, especially when you're doing something new. But it's been great to just persevere and learn about myself, learn about others, because I was not the only one that was in my cohort at Wake that sort of came in with not as much experience. And so leaning on them and working with them was great for my confidence. And again, it just steadily over time, I was able to succeed and make my thesis film, which is I'm still working on it, still tweaking it to officially release it to the public. But that was a really great experience, and it led me to this, because I actually got in contact with the School of the Arts through one of my former professors at Wake. So it was definitely a full circle moment for me, and I was just really excited and grateful to have that opportunity, and it worked out. Yeah.
Did you always love film?
I did, yeah. Me and my sister, my older sister, she's 5 years older than me. She's not gonna like that I just gave that out. But me and my sister, like, that's what we did as kids. We just watched movies. We'd watch movies all the time, and then we would recite like lines from those movies to annoy our parents. So we just break into like a little like monologue between ourselves, and they just look at us like, what are they doing? Like what's going on? And so yeah, I think that's where my love for it came from that. And just again, always love going to the movie theater, always love having that shared experience with everybody and seeing it on the screen. And I think as I got older, I just never really thought that it was something that you could go to school and learn how to do. I didn't know that you could do that sort of thing. And I credit I credit NC State for that, because I didn't know there was a film studies minor. I didn't know there were film classes. And NC State being, the STEM school, you just don't hear a lot about that. But that's why, everybody, I tell people all the time, NC State is a great organization, not just for those STEM programs, which are great themselves. And I have friends that graduated from the engineering program and all that. But I am a proud alumni of CHAS and the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. And I loved all my professors and classes there were eye opening, and I still am in contact with some people there as well. So that's where I kind of reclaimed that childhood admiration for film, and was able to turn it into another degree, and I'm here now. So just grateful and looking forward to what the future holds.
Wow, nice to hear. Yeah. So the idea for this film this just came out this year, right? So this has been only shown in select would you say festivals, or?
So our sort of premiere was at the School of the Arts, and that was I'd say that was more of a community screening, community-based event. We invited people from all over. It was actually 2 days. So we did one screening on a Friday, and then we did another on a Saturday. And then in August, I guess July into August, it was the last week of July, we screened at the International Black Theater Festival as a part of their film fest. So we premiered there, which was amazing. It was an amazing opportunity. But yeah, so it's only had two screenings so far. Right now, we're in the process of putting those final touches on it, and sort of making it. The plan is to now go forward and start applying to festivals. Probably starting next year, because at this point in the year, we've sort of missed that deadline for festivals now. So we're hoping to get it to a point where we're all comfortable with the quality, and then we'll go forward next year and really apply to a bunch of festivals, and fingers crossed we'll get in, and
just get it out there that way.
Yeah, just get it in front of people, and just get their reaction, because that's kind of that to me is just as important as making it, is getting people's reaction to it, and seeing how it impacts people and touches people. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Nice. There's nowhere to see it right now, like for someone like me, right?
No, not at the
yet.
moment, but soon it will. It will be there. Yeah.
Definitely. I did watch the trailer, and I love the trailer. I noticed the jazzy background music. Is that part of the film itself, or is that just for the trailer itself?
That is music from the film. And we were able to get that scored, which was really important, because we were at first gonna do like find music, unlicensed music online, and sort of do that thing. And then Miss Hilda Willis, bless her, she knew somebody named Michael. And Michael is a local musician. I believe they're in Pilot Mountain, North Carolina. I think that's where they're sort of located, as well as having a second home in Houston, which is really cool. But Michael Lewis, he scored the film all himself, and it's an amazing score. I just love it, because it captures the film in a way that we wouldn't have got with doing sort of canned music or getting music online. And this actually was my first time working with a composer and working with somebody that would create the music. And I remember the first time I talked to him, he was like, "Yeah, just send me the film, like no sound, just send it to me." And I
That's
was like,
it.
"Okay." And I sent it to him, and then he comes back and he's like, "Yeah, I've got like 10 different tracks here." And I was like, and this all happened in like the span of like a month. Like he came back and was like, "Yeah, I've got like all these different things." And you know, he actually came to the screening at the festival. So I was glad to sort of see him there and give him his applause, because it just, you know, it just takes the film to another level. And I just think the jazz, you know, is just so appropriate for the time period that we're talking about. And it gives it there are moments where it can be a little, it gives it the sort of tone, that serious tone that it needs, but it also at certain moments gives it the sort of fun, you know, sort of upbeat manner. And quoting from my editor Gavin, it makes cutting a lot of fun because you just cut on certain hi-hats and beats, and it's like it's just you're like creating something new. So you know, that was really really impressive, and again, kudos to him for creating that. Yeah.
Nice. How does that work in a film? Do you, as you're the director, is it you? Is it the editor? Or is it the person who's making the score? How do you decide where it goes in the film, how it evolves like that?
So yeah, so it's kind of a team effort. So it's all three of us together working. And so, you know, my editor Gavin, you know, sent me, you know, we talked about cuts, and I annoyed Gavin because we were just like bouncing every day, just like, hey, this, hey, that, you know, sort of bouncing ideas off of each other. But you know, Gavin comes to me and says, okay, this is our cut, this is what we have. And I had told him, you know, yeah, I think we want to do a score. We want to see what that would be like. And so, like I said, you know, talking with Michael, I was like, you know, I've heard, because I'd heard Hilda had told me a little bit about his jazz background, and I'd heard some of his reference tracks, and I was like, yeah, I think that could work. And he sent me some of those tracks and said, you know, hey, just send this to your editor, see, you know, if we could make this work. And you know, Gavin was like, yeah, I think this could work for this part, and I think this could work for that part. So from there, it became, okay, now let's work with Michael and let's see if we can, you know, literally break up the film into sections and then just fill the music into those sections. And so when Michael came back, he literally would like write on a track, this is for, you know, the KDB section. This is for the, you know, and then from there it was about just sort of tweaking it a little bit, sort of making sure that it fit into the film itself, that it wasn't, you know, too loud in certain points where, you know, because there are certain points of those tracks they get, you know, there's a lot of instrumentation. Sometimes can get a little bit loud if someone's talking. So we just had to make tweaks there. But really, yeah, it was a team effort between the three of us to try and coordinate, you know, what tone we wanted to have, and just how much music we wanted. Because one of the things that I try to do in my films, and I learned this at Wake, was, you know, you don't want it to have wall to wall music, is what my professor Chris Zaleski
You mean like
at
the
Wake
whole
Forest.
playing the whole time?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the things he told us, like one of the first classes we had on editing, he was like, "It's not a music video." So,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, you want
exactly.
to you want to have that in your head where it's like,
Okay,
yeah, you know, and it can be tough because, you know, if you get some good music, you're just sitting there
sure.
editing, you're like, this sounds
Let's
amazing,
keep it
and you're just
going.
sitting there, you know, and you don't ever want to cut it off because it's like, I don't want to cut it off. This sounds good, but you know, just having that realization of, okay, you know, there's a time and place, and there are certainly points, especially in this film, because we have so much archival photos. There are moments in the film where I said to myself, when I have this photo, this very powerful photo, I don't want to hear anybody talking. I just want
Yeah,
that photo up, and I want to hear that jazz music. And that's what we went for. And there are points in the film where we go 5 minutes, you haven't heard any words. You're just seeing the history itself. You're just seeing these pictures. We're not, you know, obviously we do have a point of view, we do have an argument that we're making, but there are certain points where, you know, this is just going to speak for itself. These pictures are going to speak for themselves. These people in these photos, you're going to sit there and you're going to wonder, who is that? I wonder who that is. And that's what we're trying to get to, because we're trying to get you to come back, always come back to the archive, ask questions, call, you know, email Lester and Billy and want to talk to them, have them take you on a tour of the archive, which they love to do, by the way. They would love to take people on a tour of the archive and just show you that history. So yeah, the music was a really big help for those sections where I just wanted to just clear out the noise and just let that history play out itself. So yeah, it was really fun.
Music stands out. I'm a big music lover, so that really stood out in the trailer. So I thought it was really well done. So, how long is the overall film? How many minutes?
Yeah, so right now we're at 46 minutes. And by the time we get to showing it off properly, it'll be around 40. And that's for festival preferences.
Okay.
If a film is over 40 minutes, festivals are like, all right, this is no longer a documentary short. This is now a full-length feature. And that can, put you in a different bracket in terms of how
Okay.
they view it and things like that. So for our purposes in festivals, and just for purposes in terms of the archive distributing the film, we were like, okay, let's come back down a little bit, because at 46 minutes, we're not going to get to an hour. We're not going to get to an hour 20.
To
That's
be
going
a
to be a
full length
stretch.
feature.
It'd be
Yeah.
much easier to just scale back a little bit, get to that
Okay.
40-minute mark. So it's going to be around 40 minutes. And we are looking to do a more in-depth trailer as well. So the trailer that you've seen and that is available is around 2 minutes, I believe, and that's kind of the teaser. And so we're gonna have a more in-depth trailer coming off of that reduce. So that 40-minute, we're gonna have a trailer based on that. It's gonna be around 5 to 7 minutes. So it's gonna be a little bit more in depth, get you a little bit more of the story itself, and yeah, looking forward to that as well.
Nice. Oh, that's great. Is that going to be really difficult for you to cut that 6 minutes though? Is that...
It's like the worst thing I remember, and I'm gonna keep saying his name, Chris Zaleski, at Wake Forest. When we were in school, when I was making my thesis film, he was my advisor. And towards the end, right before I defended, he kept telling me, he was like, "Look, you're gonna have to cut your darlings." And he was talking about those scenes that you love them because you created them, and it's like you feel this attachment to it. And for my thesis film, I edited that. I did all that on my own. And so he was like, "Look, I know you love it because I've seen it." Because at that point, he'd seen it like a bunch of times. He was like, "Look, but in order for this part to be stronger, we got to cut this." And that can be the challenge sometimes, especially as a creator, to just be like, I got to cut this thing. I got to, this scene that I've just poured over for so long, it's got to be cut for the rest of it to sort of make more sense or be stronger. And I find that not just with filmmaking, I find that, even in writing, and when I wrote papers when I was at State, and even since then, you have those moments where, like, in the moment when you made it, you were like, this is amazing. This is just so great. And then you realize, unfortunately, got to cut it because there's that, that greater payoff. So it's going to be hard to cut those 6 minutes. But I'm working with such a great team at the School of the Arts. And it will be a team effort. So it'll be, they may have to look at me and be like, "Look, Rodney, we get it." They may have to have a come to Jesus moment about, "Look, got to cut this scene." And I'm just like, "All right, fine, I'll do it." So, I'm not looking forward to cutting too much, but I think it'll be, just that much stronger. And again, it'll make it easier for us in the festival runs and things like that. So, yeah.
Sure. Now they came to you with the idea.
Mhm.
Were you just immediately, "This is it, I'll do it"?
Yes, I think because I'd heard that they were gonna do a film steeped in history, so that was all I needed right there. Was just like, oh, history nerd within me got on board. And I think just the idea that it was going to be local, the idea that it was going to be done by the community for it was going to be, done with the help of the archive. I think that was a big selling point for me, as well as, again, talking about African American history like that. That was a big draw for me. My thesis film is set in Greensboro, and it details the life of a local entrepreneur named David Small, who owns a drone company. But it talks about his life, his trials and tribulations, but also talks about the African American history within Greensboro, and specifically the entrepreneurial history of small business, small Black owned business in the city. And so I just got done doing that. So I already knew, like, this is kind of like the same. It feels like the same sort of project. And I worked on projects when I was in school, and I've worked on projects since, where whenever I'm signing on to do a project, that is the thing that kind of does it for me. It's that first moment of like, yep, this is it. And I turned down projects before where, I sit and I listen to what the pitch is, and I'm like, yeah, I could see myself doing it, but there's not that immediate. With this, it was that immediate, like, this, I know I want to do this, I know I can do this. And I think that you always want to have that feeling. Obviously, it doesn't come all the time. Sometimes it comes later. But with this, I just knew that, like, this is a historical film. This is an African American film. This is a community-based film that it's gonna touch a lot of people. It's gonna be seen by people within the community and without, because we're gonna try and we're trying to do festivals. We're also trying to work with universities. We're trying to work with universities in Winston, Wake Forest, obviously, the School of the Arts. We've had somebody from Forsyth Tech reach out to us and inquire about the film. We did a sort of, it was on Zoom, but I'm gonna call it like a roundtable discussion with a group of students at a local school in Winston, and talk to them about filmmaking and the film itself. So all of those aspects of it, I knew immediately. I was like, this is the kind of thing that I want to do, and this is the kind of thing that is going to leave an impact and going to really resonate with people. So that's always my goal with creating. And yeah, I just knew that it was going to be something special, and I'm really again fortunate and blessed to have gotten that opportunity, and then to have continued to receive that support even now. And even doing this is just, again, it's great to thank people and give people their flowers, and again, just talk about these things, because I like talking about film, I like talking about history. So it's in my wheelhouse. So yeah, I'm just really blessed to have that opportunity.
And are you still working on the thesis film?
I am, yes. So I need to. So all the fine tuning that I talked about with the film we're doing now, I have not yet started that process on my thesis film. So I need to go in and do that. And still working with David Small. He's a mentor of mine at this point. I still text him a lot, just for advice, and just asking, like, hey, what do you think of this? And because he's also a creator. A lot of his work with drones is in imagery, and like he does a lot with real estate agents, and he does a lot with works with the city on, like, when they're starting to build, and doing just overhead shots of building sites and things like that. He also does he does music videos. Like, he just got done doing a music video in Africa, and he sent me he texted me one night and just sent me the video, and I was like, all right, just I didn't know you were in Africa at all. It's like, if somebody had asked you where you were, I would have had no idea. But so I'm really happy that I was able to do that film with him. And he's somebody that, again, I have to thank, because at the time when I did my thesis film, I had a film idea, it fell through, and it wasn't anybody's fault really. It just didn't really work out, which can tend to happen. And I was kind of lost. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I was like, I have some other options, but at this point, I'm not really sure. And I remember I reached out to was it the chamber? The city of Winston-Salem. Reached out to the city of Winston-Salem and was like, can you give me a list of, like, Black-owned businesses within the city? I want to talk to some business owners. And they sent me this giant spreadsheet of, like, 100 different businesses across, like, the state of North Carolina. And I was like,
Wow.
oh my goodness. Okay. So I went through it, and I was like, all right, that sounds good. That sounds good. And I came across a business, Skyline Video Pros. And I was like, that sounds cool. That sounds like, sci-fi. That sounds cool. So I got David's email, and I emailed him. And anybody who sent an email knows, when you send an email, you got to give it a day, maybe two, maybe even a week, right? Because
Oh
people,
yeah, sure.
people don't respond to emails. David responded in like 30 minutes of me sending that email. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, I'd love to talk with you. Let's meet. And the first time we met, he tells me, yeah, I never checked that email. Just
Oh.
I don't check it. It's just an email that I have. I just was on my computer that day. And so it's those kind of things I like to bring up, because there are those moments where you just are in the right space at the right time. And I can't explain it. I can't tell you why it happened, but it did. And I just have to thank him for trusting me with that film and trusting me to tell his story, because it is a nuanced story. It's a lot of ups and downs, but he's still here. He's still doing great work. And he told me when we first did the film, he sat me down and he was like, look, I don't care how good you are. I don't care how much experience you have. All he told me was, only thing I expect from you is to show up. Just show up when we have shoots, show up, to finish it, basically. Persevere through it and finish it. And that was just in my mind the entire time I made it. I was like, I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep doing these things. And full disclosure, there were moments where I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. No idea what I'm doing. But
That's your
I'm just
first
going to,
film, right? It's your first.
exactly. First
Yeah.
film, nervous as can be before a shoot. I'm driving and I'm like, what happens if this happens? And then I show up and you just do it. You just learn how to survive and adapt. And that has been probably the biggest learning experience for me, not just for film, but just life in general. It's just like, you know, we all would love to just like have everything figured out and just go and do that. But a lot of things aren't like that. A lot of things are going to be scary and they're going to feel like, if I mess this up, but more often than not, I think if you just throw yourself into something full force and just sort of, understand that whatever happens, I'm going to adapt, I'm going to adjust. If I do fail, well, then I know how to not do it. So when I come back to it, I'll know how to do that. And that's just been my mantra as a creator, as a filmmaker, for the past few years. It's just like, some things are a little bit, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do that, but I'm going to at least try it. And then if I can't do it, cool. Then I'll figure out some way to do it differently or do something else. But, just having that fearlessness of just like, let me just do this. Let me see what I can do. Because in my opinion, worst comes to worst, you just find out, well, that sucked. Move on, and
Oh well.
you shrug it off and you move forward. So yeah.
Wow, wow, what a journey. Yeah. Was that thesis film, it was part of a course credit for,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so
It
there were
was.
deadlines and you had to establish
Definitely deadlines. The film program, the film program has two tracks. So there is an MFA, which I got, which is in documentary film, and then that's a 2-year program, and then there's an MA for sports storytelling, and that's a
oh,
year and a half.
really different. Yeah.
So there's two different tracks. I took the MFA track, and you basically, you come in, they teach you how to do everything your first year. So the first, semester is basically like, here's how you shoot, here's how to do an interview, here's how to edit, very, very, bare bones. But, again, someone like me, I needed that. I needed that, very fundamental teaching. And then as you go through the program, you learn a little bit more. You start to do projects. So while I was there, I worked on projects as a student filmmaker, for other people, and that was a way to be like, all right, let me keep getting experience that way. And yeah, and then towards the start of your second year, that's when the deadlines start popping up about thesis and thesis hours and working on your film. And then it gets to a point which it was a long, like, 3 months of like, from sort of February of 23 to when I graduated in May, of just like making cuts every day, and then every week turning those cuts in and then getting feedback, and then back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And yeah, it was a lot. That like 2-month period before I defended my thesis was like one of the most stressful times of my life, and just a really like, oh my goodness, this is just really, that intensity of like, we're getting close to the end. but I was able to get through it, and I was able to just sort of take those critiques and sort of tweak my film, and learn, this is how it is, especially in a business where sometimes you gotta go. Especially if you're editing, somebody may give you a film, a bunch of raw footage and say, hey, I need this turned around in like a month. I need something in a month. And it's like, you have to kind of be at that pace sometimes. So great learning experience, and I'm here today. So
Nice.
something went right. So but yeah, overall, again, just a great experience for myself. And if anybody wants to apply to the documentary film program in Wake Forest, I would say that is a great thing to do. And those people over there are, again, some of the greatest people that I've had the pleasure of meeting, and they're really down to earth. And if you just want to talk, because you can come in and just sit in on a class and just see what the program is about. And so again, they're not paying me to say this. It's just off the top of my head. But yeah, just a great program, great people. And again, I can't say enough about what they've done to get me here. So yeah.
The film obviously doesn't have to be a finished film, right, to pass, and very much like a novel or a collection of stories in a MFA in writing program. It may not be ready to publish, but it's course credit. It's checked off. It's
Exactly. And they, that was another thing too. Like, they brought in alumni to talk to us and say, hey, like, guys, your thesis film is not gonna be, it's not your end all be all. It's not like, if this thing isn't perfect, you know. And I remember they brought in somebody that showed us his thesis film, and he was like, look, he spent like the entire time like, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right.
wow.
And he was like, see, and I so understanding that, I think the purpose of that, especially from a learning aspect, from a schooling aspect of it, it's more that you just know the fundamentals. The extra stuff, the little things here and there that you look back. I look back at my thesis film now, it's only been like a year and a half, but I look back at it now and I'm like, I wish I would have done that. I wish I wouldn't have done that. But that's because, I've learned more, and it's been longer, and I've worked on other things. And so, of course, you're going to come back and look at it and be like, okay, yeah, I think that's it. But more point of the program is just to say, the fundamentals, how to make a film. And that's what they're really looking for. You know how to make it, how to articulate yourself about it, and you can go forward in the world, in the industry, and do whatever you want. You may not be a director. You may go into it and be a sound person. You may be an editor. You may be a cinematographer working with the
Hundreds
camera.
of jobs, and
There's
like, right,
hundreds of
when
different
you look at
jobs
the
that you can
credits
do.
of a movie, I mean, it's just hundreds of people.
It's insane. Like, this is obviously not nowhere near the level I'm at right now. Hopefully one day. I watched the new Deadpool Wolverine and the credits, and I remember I was at the movie with my mom, and I remember I tapped her on the shoulder. I was like, look how many people they have just for like this like special effects section. Just this one scene. It's like 30 different people. Like, and it's but that's the industry. It's not, obviously everybody wants to be, the main person, but it takes a village to make a film. No film is made by one person or by a sort of small group. It's made by a lot of people. And so, that is something that I think the program does very well. They give you everything. So they're going to give you expertise on the full scale of things: editing, shooting, sound, lighting. But you then get to decide, all right, well, maybe I'm not the best editor, but you know what? I really enjoy like audio design. I'm gonna go do that. And you can do that. And you can sort of take all of that, and then you sort of mold yourself into what it is you really feel like you can do. And for myself, I think that meant, I full disclosure, I don't think I do not know everything about cameras and about the ins and outs, about settings and all those different things. So my sort of calling was more about storytelling. It was more about directing and producing, about writing out the story. And that's what I did here. And it's what I do for, what is done for all films. And you have to write those films out. So I'm still using still using those writing skills, to write out the film. I had to type out exactly what was going to be seen, on screen, because that then helps my editor, so he can say, oh, okay, here's your idea, here's the sort of world that you've built. Let me then do the actual work to build that world, along with having conversations. So, for me, I realize, like, yeah, when it comes to like technical things, I may not be as well versed in that, but I can, tell a story. And so I'm going to sort of gravitate towards that. So then when it comes to making these films, I then can work with an editor, work with a cinematographer that knows more about that than I do, so that I can just give them the idea, and then they can go out, use their own artistic ability, their own creativity, to then do that, and then we can come together and create something like this film. And I love that. I love that teamwork and that collaboration. And so, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing I learned, is like, you don't have to be, a mastermind and know every in and out. You just need to know what you're passionate about and work on that. And then everything else, again, if you don't know, ask for help. If you feel overwhelmed, there are people there helping, not just my professors, but my cohort, my classmates. I needed them for help, and not just, hey, come help me on a shoot, but hey, I'm freaking out about my film. Can you just come and like talk to me about? And they did that. And so, I think that's the beauty of a program like that, and doing that, because we all know in this day and age, like, I can learn all these things on YouTube for the most part. I can learn how to set up an interview. I can do all that, but that's not why I went to school. I went to school to meet those people, to meet the people that I can't meet on my computer just watching a video. But I can go to school, and now I have 13 or 14 other people that I went to school with that, hey, I'm working on a film. Can you help me on lighting? Can you help me with audio? Like, those are relationships and bonds that you have. And then you go into an industry where a lot of what you do is dominated by who you know, and you have that. And so, that's been the biggest takeaway for me. And again, I'm really appreciative of them and everything they do. So.
Obviously, a lot of the jobs are in Hollywood, New York, other places, but you can still be a filmmaker in other places these days, right?
You can, and I think, the piece of advice, that I always go back to, that I got from my academic advisor at NC State, another plug, and just keep doing it, was to bloom where you're planted, and that, to me, says it all. It's just, yes, there are places that are more conducive to certain industries, and yes, Hollywood, New York, obviously Atlanta now is amazing in terms of the amount of film work that's coming out of that city. But, you can buy a camera yourself, you can rent a camera yourself, and go make a film. It doesn't have to be super high budget. It doesn't have to be with a million people. You can go and make it right now. You can make a film with your phone right now, like 4K, all that, with your
A lot of
phone.
people are, I think, right there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're finding, you see all the time, people make videos and they'll say shot on iPhone, because people are just going out and they're just filming things, and they're just creating. And we're at a time now where that is easier than it's ever been. And, that can tend to have a little bit of a different effect. It can tend to make you feel like, well, I'm just one person, and not everybody. But it is a freedom that was not afforded to people, 20, 30 years ago. To the ability to just be like, I want to go film something right now. And you just go and you do it. And so, I think that's important. And I think it's important to use your surroundings, use your local talent, your local community, and embrace them. And hopefully they embrace you back, and you build your network, your community that way. And for myself, I've built out, a very good community, and I think I've put my name out there in the local community to a point where, I am, getting to do things like this. I'm getting to talk to people, and that's I take that, to heart. I really appreciate that. And yes, I do have ambition to, travel and see things, and maybe work in other places, work in bigger cities. I'd love that. But I also don't shy away from, oh, this film opportunity is in a smaller city, so I'm just not gonna. No, like I welcome, working in many different places and meeting different people because to me, that's the beauty of it. It's not, we don't want to close it off. We don't want to, gatekeep and keep things. Oh no, this is just for no. Like it should be for everybody, anywhere, anybody that wants to get involved in filmmaking, wants to get involved in making movies and making content, should be able to do that. If you have a passion for it and you want to work hard and you just want to see how far you can take it, I think everybody should have that opportunity. And for those that do, go off to LA and New York, more power to them. That is not the wrong way to go by any means. But it's just to say that there's more than one way to do things. And you can do that, and you can also work from where you are. You can work from your small town, you can work from your county, you can stay and do things there, and then do the other things, or stay there. So yeah, I'd say that you can do it anywhere you want, anytime you want, any how you want. If you want to make a film that is going to be seen at your local library, do it, because you never know who's going to come to that screening and who's going to see that film and say, that's really interesting, I want to talk more to you about either that film, or I have a film idea for a whole nother film, and I think you could be great on it. You never know what's going to come out of just doing something, creating it, and then just showing it off. And it doesn't matter if two people see it or 200, right? As long as somebody sees it, that's an opportunity to go forward. And that's what I've been lucky enough to experience in my young career. And so I just want everybody to just, again, if it may not even be filmmaking, if it's just something that you feel like you want to do, you want to create, I say do that thing and just see where it goes. So yeah.
We're in such a culture now of these YouTube creators, and I think there's a big difference between what they do and what you do, obviously. And I worry particularly about like the children's shows that they create. Like, who's this guy? What is he saying to our children? They're not really like really. When you got a real children's show, it's their psychologists come in, and there's consultants, and there's all these different people that come in to make sure everything is legitimate. But with these people just making these shows in their backyard, and you just don't know, so there is that concern. But
It is, and it's interesting because I'm late '90s kid. I grew up on like Blue's Clues
yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
I so yeah, I mean it definitely has changed. I mean, are kids even like watching TV anymore?
I
Really,
don't
or
know.
is it
Yeah,
is it
that's a
just
good. Yeah.
the YouTube space? For me, wasn't YouTube. It was like Nickelodeon's on, so we'll
Yeah.
just we'll just watch that. And yeah, I mean, I think it definitely has changed a lot. And again, there is definitely a responsibility for creators to be like, okay, yes, you're creating this thing, but and I find this, I do think that unfortunately some people do create things, but I don't think they ever stop to ask themselves like why they created that thing. They just sort of did it and they were like, I just felt like it. And it's just like, okay, that's fine. But I think at a certain point, especially if it comes to, again, your audience, have that talk with yourself. Like understand, like, hey, why do I want to make this thing? What is this gonna be in terms of who's gonna see it? What's the impact that I want? Because if you don't ask that question, then yes, I think that's how you get yourself into some hot water when it comes to, maybe you showed somebody something that they shouldn't have seen, or you stepped on some toes, not on purpose, but because you never really asked yourself that very simple question. So yeah, I agree. I think we unfortunately live in a very fast-paced culture where it's like, let's just go 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 go. And I think
I want to get
sometimes that's
likes,
good.
right?
I want to get likes, I
Follows
want to
and
get
likes.
engagement. And again, that's fine, but I think also we need to have a balance of like, yeah, but like, what is the purpose? What do I want to put out there? And then, and probably more importantly, what is this going to say about me as the filmmaker? What is this? Because these things are going to follow you.
Yeah.
Especially internet. Like it's not gonna it's not gonna go away. anytime soon. So you have to understand, and you want to try and surround yourself with people that are like-minded, that have those values and morals that you aspire to, and hopefully that will do the trick. But yeah, got a lot of interesting pros and cons nowadays that are not so good. So yeah.
Well, the thesis film, does that have a name yet, a title
Yes, it does have a title.
that you could
That
share?
title is I am blanking on that title right now. It is Unique Past, Bright Future. That is the name of my thesis film.
Okay.
And that again is in very, 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 very early stages of
You
putting
do
together
plan on
final
sharing that with
thoughts.
the world in some capacity, though?
I do, yes.
Nice.
And that again, that film is obviously, it means a little bit more to me, obviously, because it's more personal in terms of my journey. And it's a film that, again, I just think that people need to see, and I think people need to see David, and they need to see all these other entrepreneurs that I have in the film and the history. It's also about my hometown, so I feel a little
Yeah.
bit of pride that way. And so yeah, that will be soon. Fingers crossed. I just think that with We Are Because We Were, that came up at a time when I was thinking about, like, I think I'm going to start working on and then it was like, oh, here's another opportunity, and I was like, all right, well, let's go do this. And then this has been, again, this even outpaced my own expectation of just how much where this was gonna take me personally, but also where who we'd be, sort of interacting with. So yeah, it's a very exciting time.
So the new film, how long did that take to put together?
Let's see, how long did that take? So we started sort of consulting on that last October, and we finished that one in May. So that was that November, December, January, March, April, May. About
7, 8 months?
8 months,
Yeah,
give or
yeah.
take. And if I'm not mistaken, Lester and Billy had been in conversation with the School of the Arts for about 3 years. So they
Wow.
were, yeah, they were talking about it for a long time. I think obviously COVID impacted what they
Oh, yeah.
could, when they could get started, but it was always sort of in the back of their minds. And then by the time I came on board, it was kind of like, okay, we know what we want to do. And like I said, that's why, we had those original conversations with Billy and Lester to just say, like, you have the idea. We just want to execute it, and obviously, yes, I'm going to come in and take those ideas and make them into a film. But both Billy and Lester knew, like, they had a good idea of, like, this is what we want to do. This is what we're passionate about, and that makes it so much easier for me to just step in and say, all right, I'm gonna take these great ideas, and now it's my job to just put them into a story and execute. So
Nice. And you said that you map these kinds of films out, documentary films. Do you essentially have a screenplay, a script or is it in a different
it's
format?
it's more of a, so the technical term is a visual treatment. And
Treatment. Okay. Yeah.
that is basically, and it is a screenplay to an extent, and really just is just a world diagram of just these are the settings I want for interviews and things like that. These are the transitions I want. I want music playing here. I want a close up here. I want a medium shot here. That's where I'm getting to take the ideas and just sort of put them in a sequence of, this happens here, this happens here, this happens here. And again, they're more beneficial for editors, so that an editor sees your film and is saying, oh, okay, this is what you want. Now I can go ahead and do that. When I did my thesis film, I didn't do that as much because I was editing it. So I was in the same mind. But, in the industry, especially if you're working with an editor that's outside, that editor has no idea what the story is. And that editor usually is coming in maybe about halfway through production to then start piecing it together. And, they could sit there and, watch hours and hours of footage and try to get an idea, but it's a lot more simple and a lot more fluid if they just see it, see what your idea is, and then go from there. And yeah, so it is in that way, because I think there is a distinction between doing documentary film and doing narrative filmmaking. And those differences are, they're there, but I always like to say that you're pretty much in the same basket with both. You're some, and I feel like nowadays there have been things taken from both and put into each other. There are certain aspects of documentary that you're seeing in narrative film now. Sort of the what they like to call the mockumentary, which is, you'll see a documentary style interview within a narrative film. So it's like you're seeing those elements, within both. And I think they both sort of lend themselves to each other. I had a cohort mate of mine who had come from working in Atlanta on Marvel films, and she came to documentary, and so she was a great help when it came to like, so what goes on in like that world. And she was like, well, it's this, and this. And some things were like, I was like, wow, that's completely, different than what we do here. But certain things were similar. So yeah, I think that the visual treatment and sort of writing that thing out and storyboarding, that's something that is shared between the two, of like, it probably would make sense to get my ideas out of my head before I start, trying to piece this thing together. So yeah.
Well, and with a documentary film, it's quite the I guess the big difference might be that you're planning things out before, but you don't know yet what people are going to say in the interviews. And so then you have kind of a pre-plan, but then a post-plan when you have these hours and hours of footage and interviews. So that might be
Yeah, would I
probably
would
the difference.
I would 100% agree. And that's the thing. Like when I talked about adaptability, like you have a plan, but I've been in interviews where I'm like, all right, I'm going to ask these questions, and especially if it's questions where you're like, okay, I'm going to ask this like emotional evoke. Hopefully, this question evokes some emotion, right? And you ask it, and the person's just like, yeah, yeah, I did that, and it's just it's like a
So
gut
it
punch.
doesn't
It's
go as
like,
planned.
oh no, I just because like that was the thing. And it's also, I've been in interviews where I'm like, all right, this interview is probably going to be like 30 minutes. I have this list of questions, and we just burn through like 80% of the questions in like 5 minutes. And I'm like,
Oh no.
okay, I gotta kind of go with the flow. Yeah, I think there's much more planning, I feel like, with narrative, and again, doing multiple takes and doing it to a point where you have all these options. With documentary, I think it's more about, doing things in a more, it's gonna let the camera roll, and we're gonna roll, and we're just gonna get as much as we can, and then we'll come back and we'll chop it up. I think, with doing interviews, and yeah, you don't know what somebody's gonna say based on that day, based on how they're feeling. Some people, that's why I don't like to do my first interview as my hard hitter. I like to do, first of all, I like to talk with my participants first without a camera, so I can sort of get a sense of how they communicate and what kind of things they like to talk about, and how they talk in terms of their cadence. Because I don't want to jump in and like interject or anything like that, if I can help it. So I like to talk beforehand. And so when I get into an interview and I'm doing one that is more, in depth, I try to then in that interview, like, set it up a little bit softer. I don't necessarily go for, so how was your child? Like, I don't want to like scare anybody, but there are those moments. And we had it in this film with Lester. We asked him about his childhood because he grew up in Winston. And we asked him about a story about when he was a little boy and he saw a fire truck coming down the street, and the firefighters that were on the truck were all Black. And growing up in Winston, as a young African American kid, he just hadn't seen anything like that before. And it was a really emotional story, and it's one of the best parts of the film. So I don't necessarily want to spoil it too much, but that was an emotional moment, and I knew it was going to be emotional because we talked to Lester before the film, and he told the story, and he was getting emotional, no cameras. And I looked at Hilda and I was like, if we need to get that, if I can just get that on camera, that'd be great. And so before I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to do this. Don't know if it's gonna work. And like clockwork, he just, because I could see it in his eyes, he just went right back to that mindset, right back to being a little kid. And we got that emotion. It's great to get it. And as a filmmaker, I'm like, yes, hit the lottery, right? That's great. But in the moment, I'm just sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm like, kudos to Lester to be that open, to be that trusting of me and my team, to sit there and talk with us and give that raw emotion, not planned emotion, not sort of oh okay, let me get the water bottle out and dab my face. Like he really felt that and really sort of connected on that. And I think that's the power of documentary, and what we can get is because Lester's not a trained actor. Lester's not, this is just a guy talking about his life. And I think that to me is important, because I think we all have a story. We all have a story we could tell, whether from when you were a kid, or maybe it was even last week, that you could tell and be like, yeah, that was whether it was whether it was an emotional story because it was a, maybe it was a heartache, or it was something, that was more melancholy, or if it's a good story, it's a positive story, but it meant, that much to you. And to know that we all have that, but to know that some people don't get the opportunity to tell that story, that's unfortunate. And so my job, my goal is like, no, I want to talk to everyday people. I want to talk to the person who, is, you just saw walking down the street, and ask them, because you always think about that, like, what is that person that I just saw, on the street? What are they going through? Or that guy that just cut you off in traffic. It's like, yeah, you want to curse at him, you want to scream at him, but it's also like, what else, what's going on though in that person's life that may be impacting that, you know what I mean? And maybe just, but we only see each other in glimpses and instances. And I don't think social media helps with that, because everybody on social media is like, my life is great. This every
Right.
day is great. And we all know that's not the case. And that can be hard, I think, for younger people as well, because you look at it and you're like, man, it's just a Tuesday. I'm just sitting here, and my friend from college is in like Cabo somewhere, and they're living life. And it's like, yeah, but it's like, then when you go on vacation, that friend isn't home, and they're thinking the same, so having that understanding. And I think having, watching films that are more sort of grounded in that reality, and grounded in the reality of everyday people, that's where you get a sense of like, wow, like I'm not the only person that thinks that. Like, that person thinks exactly like I did about this thing, or I can relate to that, particular instance. And I think that brings us together, and I think makes you a more well-rounded person, because then you're thinking about people in a more well-rounded way. You're thinking about them as a total. You're not just thinking about them as a statistic or a trend. And is that helps me, when I'm doing historical films, because I love history, but history has a way of taking people's lives and just crunching them down into like a stat, or like one story or one anecdote about their entire lives. And it's like, yeah, I get why you're doing that, because you're trying to tell a more broad story, but everybody we're talking about, these are real people. They have hopes, they have dreams, they have ambition, they had things that didn't work out, they had girlfriends, boyfriends, you know what I mean? They had things that happened to them. And I think obviously it's impossible to know all of it, to know everything about what everybody's going through, but I think it is imperative that we try to be a little bit more understanding of people and what they're going through, and be a little bit more introspective that way, and then use that to hold up a mirror to ourselves and be like, yeah, maybe maybe I've been a little bit judgmental. Maybe, and on the flip side also, maybe, be less judgmental of yourself, because it's like, you may beat yourself up for this thing that you think is a bad thing, but then you turn that and you look around, it's like, like the idea of not being alone is like, that can do wonders for you. That can take you from being so in your head about maybe not wanting to do something or not try something, because you think, well, and then you're like, wait a second, you thought that way too? Oh, great. Now we've connected in that way, and it's less scary. So that is a long-winded way of just saying, again, I think that these films, and filmmaking in general, just has that power to bring people together. And that's what I've always loved. Like I said, I've always loved going to movies, because that's that moment where for an hour and a half, we've all come together in this theater, in this whether it's a small theater or a big theater, and we've all put whatever we're going through on hold to see this, to share this experience. And when we leave, we probably won't see each other ever again. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But at least for that moment, we're sharing that experience. And I think that's why we like watching movies, we like watching shows, we like watching sports, we like doing these things together. And I'll be honest, even though I'm, that younger generation, I don't really like watching movies and stuff on my laptop by myself, because it's not the same. It doesn't feel like I don't have my popcorn. I don't I don't have my, my 3D glasses, from back in the day. Like, I don't have that experience of, being a kid, and like you come out of the movie theater and it's like, hey, like you see a movie with your friends and you're like, did you see what Spider-Man just did? Like, that's crazy. Like, that's what, yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I love. That's what, I think a lot of people like. And so, even though we're in an era now where it's like instant streaming and this film just came out and it's already on like Max or it's already on Netflix, there's still that want. And I know people were scared because after the pandemic, it was like, are people going to go back to movie theaters? And I'm happy to say I just went to a movie last week and it was packed. And wow. So I think people really still like that feeling of like everybody here sharing this moment. And then we can go home and we can talk about it. And the fact that it's not on a streaming platform yet. So it's like the only way to see it is to go to the movie. And then we're all a part of this like club of people that, oh, I've seen it. Have you seen it? And, you have those conversations. So that's just it, man. I'm a as well as a history nerd, I'm a film nerd. So I like having those conversations. I like connecting with people in that way. And this working on this film and working on the films that I do work on allows me to do that. And like I said, I couldn't be more happy to have found myself in this position where I get to do that and do it for a living, which is really cool. So yeah.
Nice. Is there a message you want people to remember from the new film?
I think the message would be that every community, whether it's today or in the past or in the future, I think every community has a story to tell, and that story is not always rosy. That story can be terrible. It can be horrifying, but it is a piece of that larger narrative. And, with this film, there are some things about it and some topics that we're going to bring up that, are not so great. They're not so, empowering, right? You think about the things that African Americans in Winston have been through, not just in the past, but even in the more recent history. Like I said, with urbanization and urban renewal and literal highways cutting through neighborhoods and cutting off certain parts of communities, that's not something that people necessarily want to hear, right? No one, everybody wants to just, it's the past and forget about it. No, we got to talk about it, because that is what's going to inform what's going on right now. That is why, maybe some people aren't trusting of certain organizations because they've been done bad in the past. And so that causes that disconnect. And so I think if we are going to continue to go forward and, if we want to be a society of people that is more inclusive and more understanding, we gotta unearth that. We gotta rip off these band-aids and look at these scars. We can't hide them anymore. We can't, be in a situation where it's like, well, if we say that, that'll make people feel bad about themselves. Well, it's like, I mean, so like, yeah, that's how we get, that's how we go forward. And, a film like this is, again, not necessarily that we're going to harp for the whole 40 minutes about, oh, it's sad. it's not that. There are plenty of moments in the film where you're going to feel empowered and you're going to feel like, wow, this is really cool. I'm really glad that I got to know this. But that is coupled with all these other things. And so hopefully you watch the film and you come out of it and you say to yourself, I don't, I would love for you to tell me this is great, amazing film, Rodney, you're amazing. I'd love that. That feeds my ego. But more than that, all I really would want you to say is I want to know more. I want to learn more about that thing. I've had people after the festival came up to us and said, I had no idea that thing existed. And that to me says more than, oh, great job. Because to me, that shows me I did the job that I wanted to do. We as a team did the job we set out to do, which was to just wiggle our way into your brain and just pose that question of, if I didn't know about that, what else do I not know? What else do I need to talk about? What else do I need to explore? And curiosity to me is the goal. I want you to just be curious about things that you may not have thought about, things that you may have thought about, but you weren't ready to think about them in such a broad way. And I think that, again, is not me saying that if you're not ready, that, oh, you're terrible. No, because everybody, comes to the table at their own time. But I just want you to have that feeling of like, this is something that these are people that I want to know more about. These are stories I want to hear about. I want you to go to the archive, talk to Billy and Lester, and I want Lester to spend an hour talking to you about one single picture because he can do that. Because he has that, he's done that. I've experienced that, him taking a picture out and saying, yeah, this is so and so, and she lives on, Trade Street, and she's got 2 grandsons. And I want you to experience that, because when you experience that, you'll understand that if he can spend an hour teaching you about one photo, imagine what you'll learn if you delve into the boxes and boxes of photos and video and audio and newspaper clippings and all these different things. So that would be my message, is just, have that curious mind, go into it with the idea that I am going to come out of this with maybe not a new complete understanding, but at least a curiosity of like, at least the knowledge to say, I didn't know that. The knowledge to say, I don't know. I didn't know that was a thing. And now I want to know more. I want to do my research. Because again, that is how I view filmmaking. Those are my favorite films. My favorite films are when I watch something and I say to myself, yeah, I'm going to go on YouTube now and watch like probably an unhealthy amount of videos explaining what went on in that film. That to me, are those are things that are going to stick in your brain longer than something where it's like, yeah, I saw that thing, but I already knew about that, so I'm just going to move on. So curiosity would be my message. And again, just to have that curious mind and just go into it with the mindset that you're going to learn something, and hopefully that is something that sparks further contemplation. So yeah.
Nice. Well, we are Because We Were. Really look forward to getting my hands on a copy. I'm an old DVD kind of person, so but if I could eventually see it somewhere, that would be great. I look forward to it. Look forward to hearing about your future work. So really, thank you for taking the time today to talk about your work.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, we do have a trailer, and I will plug it. It is on it's on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn from me personally. But that I will put that on YouTube as a way for people to see it very, very soon. So that link, I'll share that link with you as well.
Nice.
So that
we'll definitely link to that. Yeah, share that.
Yeah.
Get the message.
This was great.
out.
This is great. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Filmmaker Rodney Wilds, everybody.
Thank you.